share our experiences.
So much fun.
Yes. So for all of you in the chat, just remember Samantha hasn't seen these, so we are starting to enter high spoiler territory. So just be aware in the chat. We don't want to ruin anything that's coming up. And yes, hi everyone who's come in. Astro, thank you for this renewed subscription. 6 months. Woo woo. And Professor Noor, thank you, welcome. Jedi has entered the chat. And Todd, hi. Happy to have you. Okay, so we are going to be talking about the first 6 episodes of Season 4 of Deep Space Nine. We are on the two-parter, Way of the Warrior. Then we are going to talk about The Visitor. Grab your tissues. We are going to be talking about the Hippocratic Oath, Indiscretion, and Rejoined. And we'll do a little spiel on each of them before we start the discussion. We'll be here for an hour. And if you miss any of this or you have to leave, these go up on the YouTube channel. So you can find the link below. Just search for Aaron McDonald in YouTube. And you can watch our past streams -1 that disappeared into the void.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so should we dive right in?
Let's do it.
All right. So Way of the Warrior, part 1 and 2. This is season 4, part 1 and 2. Oh, love it.
Klingons! Klingons have entered the chat.
We love ourselves.
So many Klingons.
Some Klingons, yes. I love this episode for all the reasons. Essentially, the quick rundown, if you don't remember, war has now broken out between the Klingons and the Cardassians. They already have unsteady alliances with the Federation, and so the Federation's deciding how to manage everything. Klingons being super aggressive against the Cardassians doesn't help the situation. And they bring in our favorite Worf.
Worf is back! I'm so happy.
To help with the situation as a mediator and understanding of the Klingons. So, yes, this is such a good episode. I think overall the big thing they are able to convey, and we'll talk about these 2 episodes together as one, but it's really managing politics. Like, that's
so many.
Just a big part of this.
Yeah, it's like a 3 or 4 way, like, they're just having to manage so many different things that could blow up at any time. It's like, and then the Klingons there just kind of make everything so much harder.
Yeah. That they do.
So they're trying to reason with them and they're like, no, war, no, honor, we must fight. And it's like, no, just calm down. But they don't calm down.
Yeah. They do not calm down.
Except in the beginning when they're all at Quark's bar. And I love that Quark was like, something's off.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? And they're like, it's quiet. And they're like, what do you mean? Have you ever met a quiet Klingon?
Also, like, credit to Quark. That's suave business analysis, is to do a decibel meter reading on his bar to just be like, it should be louder in here.
Yeah.
I love that.
That was awesome.
That's so funny. I love it. Yes. Oh, and yes, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day.
So we do love that. The other thing they're doing is, after we ended season 3, everyone's on edge about trusting Klingons, or trying to trust everyone who's a changeling, who's not a changeling. And that adds a lot of tension to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they started doing sort of the systematic blood check of everybody who arrives at DS9 and, I don't know, boards ships and everything. They're just blood check. It's like, show me your negative COVID test.
Yep.
Yep. Allegory.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. It was, this two-parter was really fun to watch. There was a lot packed in, and just widening the scope of now everybody who's involved with the wormhole and the Cardassians and the changelings. It's like widening that world.
It's a lot. And I mean, it really is it really is just political balancing is the whole theme of this, and how they manage all of that, and the fact that like they end up ultimately having to help the Cardassians, which, you know, Kira's like, well, never thought I'd be doing that. I also, just speaking of the helping the Cardassians, one of my favorite scenes where I literally like shout at the television is when they are trying to help get the senior members of the Cardassian leaders off their ship, and like because they're in, you know, because the Klingons have attacked, and Dukat, like, it's his ship and he beams himself off before the other people have all gotten off. And I'm like, dude, that's a Dukat move right there. He's just like, get out of the way, get out of the way. And like, nope, there's still people there, but I'm free.
Well, wasn't this the one where they're beaming everybody off, and he's like, we still have like 4 more people or 5 more people on there or something. So he was there to help tell them who was coming aboard, right?
I mean, okay, if you want to defend Gul Dukat's actions, I'll let you do that. But it's just still a Dukat move. I'm like, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Fair enough.
And, yeah, I love, Astro mentioned the scene where Worf is drinking with his dad's friend to find out what's going on with the Klingons. And bemoaning the stories he's told one too many times, and you tell them, well, I love that scene. Where the blood wine is like spilled everywhere, and they're drinking and bashing their heads together. So good.
Yeah. I mean, what a great introduction of Worf to the DS9 universe, because they drop him into like this situation saying, like, you need to help us like figure out what these Klingons are doing here, what they want, why they're here. And so Worf, like, once again already is in the situation of having to choose between his allegiance to Federation, allegiance to Klingons, which, you know, it's just a really interesting facet of his character. But that was the heightened sense of his introduction here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's really interesting too, Worf's arc, where he comes onto this ship and is basically like, look, I want out. Like, I'll help you, but this is the last thing I'm gonna do. And they have, like, he has some really good moments with Cisco where they do have a conversation about, like, your honor and your duty and how much you are, like, what if you're running away from things versus confronting. Like, what Worf is obviously mourning the loss of the Enterprise, and so for him, getting rid of everything that has to do with Starfleet will help him cope with that. Whereas, you know, Cisco's saying that was the same thing for me when Jennifer died. I just wanted to have nothing with Starfleet anymore, and that wasn't the solution to my problem. So I really like that scene with them.
Me too. Yeah, they had some really great moments together, and just relating about that. Because Cisco, I think, can see a lot of himself in Worf wanting to run away.
Yeah, really, really good stuff there. I really like their conversations. And I felt like the two of them too, Cisco and Worf, we haven't seen them together until this point, and they really seem to just have that good friendship chemistry right from the get-go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. You met Martok.
I did, yes. I liked him.
I love Martok. Now remember, chat, cool. Samantha has not seen the later ones, so keep your mouth shut while we talk about the arc. But I mean, in case you didn't remember, I do have the House of Martok tattooed on my arm. That's how much I love Martok. Yeah.
That's awesome.
He's my Klingon leader. Yeah, I love him.
Nice.
But yeah, let me try to think of some of the other other ones that we've got. Got to watch Deep Space Nine do a space battle.
A big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of space battling going on.
Yeah. I really like it when all of the like the battalions all come out and it's like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, in the very beginning, it wasn't space battle, but I just remembered I think the cold open was when they're like, it's there's a Klingon ship outside, they're requesting to come aboard, and Cisco's like, all right, sure. And then they like 100 of them decloak around, and they're like, oh.
The Klingons have arrived.
Yeah. It's like,
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Cisco and Cassidy Yates. I think you had a note in here about your suspicions about Cassidy.
Well, in this episode, she seemed a little off. I actually can't remember what she said or what the scene was, but my notes said she seems a little strange right now, and maybe she's a changeling.
See, they've sucked you in. You're in it now.
Just like questioning everybody.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. Rightfully so, as you should.
Yep.
And this was the one too where they start battling on the ship, and we got Garrick fighting back again with Cassians again. He's like, "This is so uncivilized. Why do we do hand-to-hand combat?"
Yeah, that was great. And I think, what does he say? Dukat was like, "Just make sure you point that thing the right direction," or something.
Yeah, it's like, those are the guys we're shooting at, not me.
What is the right direction? Who knows?
Yeah. It's good to run that check past him, for sure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And then we got Galran in this episode being all like, yeah, with the crazy eyes. Being like totally not what's the word? Just they're being so impulsive, like pulling out of the
the Kittimer
Accords with the Federation. Yeah, and being like, now we are on our own. Now we were doing our battle, and it's like, do you not realize if you had more people aligned, you could maybe make something else happen? It's like he was being very impulsive, just like not thinking very many steps ahead, it seemed to me in this episode.
Yeah. Mikhail turned our Orfable face into a thinking emoji somehow, which I think is fabulous.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's almost, we've seen and somewhat loved Galron's craziness over the years. But he almost weirdly is the closest thing to a voice of reason here, because Martok is like, blow them out of the sky, and and Gowron's like, dude, like, the Federation is now coming, like, we, it's not, I think he says something along the lines of like, losing a battle and winning the war is still honor. Like, walking away from the battle is still honorable if you're able to fight another day. And that I just found really interesting.
He does finally get to that conclusion, but it took a lot to him to get to that. So I guess I think it's just like, how did that take so much convincing? And then also Worf says, when he goes, I think it's the next episode, there's a conversation Worf has where he says he probably went back and declared victory on the battle, even though nothing happened.
Yeah. Jedi got the quote in there, leaving a battle to save the Empire is still a victory. Yeah, that was it. It is interesting, and yeah, like you said, that they're able to, they'll form their narrative however they want. And D Starfire, that was the other point I wanted to talk about in this episode, is now the relationship between Worf and O'Brien, that they get those nice reminiscent scenes, which is cute and funny because we never really got to see Worf and O'Brien together on TNG.
Yeah, I was thinking that because they didn't really spend a lot of time together, and so that was fun. And yeah, the holodecks. I'm really missing holodeck episodes. That's the one thing I'm not liking about DS9. Like, one thing is there's not very many holodecks, but
although in this episode we did get Jadzia dragging Kira in for the sexy holodeck spa time. So
I love that. And Kira's just like, but they're light and photons. They're not real. Jadzia's like, you just have to like let it happen.
Yeah.
But I did have a question about Worf and O'Brien. Like, so O'Brien is head of operations, right?
Yep.
But O'Brien is chief of operations.
Chief engineer.
But Worf, but he calls himself chief of operations like all the time.
Okay. Yep.
But Worf is now head of operations or something.
So this has to do with the commission, and people in the chat can answer this too if I'm not saying it correctly. In my mind, the difference is the fact that Worf is a commissioned officer and O'Brien's an NCO. So yeah, that you have, yeah, that's what they got it. Everyone got
Worf
it.
Is enlisted. Worf is not. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, it's the enlisted versus officer. The fact that like, and I mean, you remember from the Nog episode when he got into Starfleet and O'Brien says something like, I just realized he's going to have to call me sir, or I'm going to have to call him sir, because he's still, O'Brien's an enlisted chief, and so he's always going to rank under the officers, no matter how senior he is in whatever division he's in, he still answers to the officers.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. I never quite put that together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
strategic operations, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
It's one of those nuances to the military side that I think they don't pull on much because it's a little complicated to explain, but those are usually that's how they, because O'Brien's like probably correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but the only main character we really have who's a non-commissioned, who's enlisted. Everyone else are officers that we follow. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, same division-ish. Different ranking. But, I mean, so did you knew that Worf was coming back, right?
Yes.
Because we've mentioned that many times.
Reasons.
Still fun though, right?
Yeah, of course. I know there's some kind of baseball thing with Worf. I've seen that screenshot, and I'm just like, when is that happening?
Death to the opposition. So good. So good. Yeah, Andy said he could get a commission pretty easily if he wanted, but I think they've done a great job with O'Brien's character that he is happy where he is. This is his jam. So
right.
I don't see him elbowing his way to the top of a captainship. He just wants to fix things.
Yeah, gotcha.
Cool. All right, any final thoughts on this one?
No, great two-parter though.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
And I think it's a great follow-on to what we had just seen at the end of season 3 when they are laying that groundwork for the fact that, like, the Dominion is actively trying to break apart the Alpha Quadrant. And so that leaves you in these situations being like, okay, so who's infiltrated where and who's pulling these strings? Or is it just the tension politics falling apart as they would anyway?
Right. And it was all, I mean, this episode sort of laid that groundwork of the, you almost don't know how long they've been infiltrating certain areas to create these fissions.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the right word, between all of these different entities. And it's like, guys, like, think about this. They're creating, they're making us fight each other. So we're going to be weaker and not be able to fight them. Like, classic changeling move.
Exactly.
You would think.
So good. So unpredictable. All right. So let's move on then to The Visitor.
Yes.
Yes. So this one, after we've had peak, season finale, season opener, broad stroke, alpha quadrant, politic chaos, this quiets down a lot into a very heavy, very emotional episode. If you don't remember, this is the one where there's an accident that happens where Cisco basically becomes frozen in time, and his son, and for all intents and purposes, he's died. And Jake lives out his life with this obsession of rescuing his dad to get closure. And every few decades, he sees his dad pop up with him through time. And it's sort of told in a backstory where this woman shows up at this elder Jake's house and wants to know the whole story that's happened and why he stopped writing and all of these. Yeah, this is already, multiple people are like, Ben is a great dad. This episode makes me cry. I start tearing up minute 1 of this episode. Astro agrees. Hard agree. So, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one as a first time watch, but I mean, it's hard. It's hard to watch, but I think it goes down as one of like the top iconic DS9 episodes of all time.
I could see that.
Yeah,
I could see that. It was really, really well told, and just an interesting look at what it feels like when you can't move on, and he just becomes obsessed with this one facet of getting his dad back. And I mean, I always have a little trouble with these kinds of episodes where somebody lives a full life, a full entire life. And then that's just kind of snapped out of existence. But then the other argument for that, I guess, is maybe it wasn't a full life at all, because he had that huge hole of his dad. And he sort of came to his own realization that he really needed his dad. And it was just cut off too short. And then that little bit of hope of Cisco showing up over the decades, and he's like, I need to solve this for him and for myself.
Yeah, every time he starts to think about moving on, he shows up.
Yeah.
And oh, so good. Almost every flashback is brilliant, but I particularly like the one where I think is probably the most tragic aspect of it is where Cisco comes back and lays into him for not having lived his life. That's really, really hard.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's just one of the most interesting parts of living and growing up is like, when you're a parent, all you want is the happiness of your children, Right. It's, and so Cisco's like trying to get him to see that and live his life, but and being like, I'm okay. You should not be worrying about me. But from Jake's point of view, he can't live his life unless he helps his dad. So it's one of those, like, how do you believe what the other person's saying when it's so strong and you is an opposite?
Which, and I think too, is a tragic aspect of this story, because I think it is realistic, except for the fact that he literally shows up and that they are able to fix it and restore the timeline. But the fact that, like, an accident that takes a parent away in a really shocking and unexpected way can then throw a whole child's life out of balance as they try to find meaning in that. Whereas, like, the parent who's gone, all they would want was for their child to have gone on and lived that full life. That the parent had done all they could to set their kid up. And so the thought that they would then their lives would be consumed with that is upsetting and difficult.
Well, and then there's also the guilt aspect of, how do I live my life when they are here and when I feel responsible for what happened? Like, how there's so many different gradations of that. And, when we're trying to deal with loss, it's survival guilt and, feeling like I don't want to enjoy things because they can't. But how do you get over that? How do you find the balance of, respecting? Because I think ultimately it comes around to respecting yourself and respecting your own life.
Right.
Because he becomes consumed with it.
Well, and so D. Starfire is kind of bringing up an interesting point that I think we can all chat about. That's like, sometimes these stories can feel frustrating, and I think that's kind of how you felt initially, that it feels like a person lives their whole life and then it just disappears, and what do they remember about it or not? But I personally, like, from a story arc perspective, I think it gives us a chance to get insight into the characters and allows us to see how much Cisco's relationship with his kid needs a revectoring, that there is something. And Mikhail, yay, welcome D. Starfire. And so for a viewer, it helps develop the character. Now for the character's arc, personally, we might not see any growth from them out of that, but I think as the viewer, we understand character motives a little bit more when we see episodes like this.
Yeah, and the thing is, Cisco will remember. It's hard to tell what exactly he'll remember, but clearly he will have that sense of knowing that Jake still needs him in such a strong way, because he couldn't move on.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to step over you, but
that's okay.
I think too, though, like, so I always left this after. Well, I mean, the first time I watched it, I cried so hard I was just non-functional by the end of it, so I barely remember how it ended. But then, like, having gone back and rewatched it a few times, I think the fact that they leave it where I interpreted that basically Cisco does remember, even though it might just be flashes and conversations that for him only last 10 total minutes. He still saw what Jake's future could look like, and that he needs to, and this is where I think we do get some character development, that he realizes that the writing aspect of Jake's character is so intrinsic to who he is that without being a writer, he is really lost. And I think that is where we see those seeds sown for the characters going on.
For sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's a good point, and I appreciate. I do understand the comments from people who don't like these kind of episodes, because we go through this huge emotional catharsis, and then it's like deleted.
Yeah, like you never went through that in the first place. It was my huge frustration with Rory and Doctor Who. There's like a whole storyline when he's like standing by the box for like centuries, and then like no, those centuries like didn't happen for him at the end. But I still love them. But like that part, I was like, oh God, that's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and it can feel and I think one episode is one thing. To do that for an entire season is cruel.
Little excessive, yeah.
Yeah. That I do. If I'm dragged on and get a reset button after an entire season, I am not pleased. I'll put it that way. But yeah, but overall, enjoyed the episode?
Oh yeah, yeah, I loved it. It's interesting that we got the girl, the visitor, was just there to be the somebody that he tells the story to. Like we didn't get any insight into who she was, why she was there. So she was basically just this vehicle for him to talk the story. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But I think it's done pretty organically. It doesn't feel, it's like they didn't make us learn too much about her. That
exactly.
We didn't need to get invested in her.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on then, if you're good.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Hippocratic Oath. So this is the episode where Bashir and O'Brien are captured by a rogue Jem'Hadar in the Gamma Quadrant. They're crashed on a planet, and they basically, like, they're trying to break their addiction to Ketracel White. And this is a rough episode for those of us who are fans of the Bashir O'Brien bromance. And I mean, they what they do is that they find out that this guy who was leading these rogue Jem'Hadar was never addicted in the first place. That it had nothing to do with the planet itself, but that he was resistant to the addiction of Ketracel White. And then, it's an interesting, so it basically goes into this idea of medical ethics and the duty of a soldier. And Bashir is the medical ethics voice. O'Brien's the voice of a soldier. They're going to be killers always. Why do we need to wipe them out? We can't help them. And Bashir's like, no, this is messed up. We have to help them. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, it is. I really was turned off by O'Brien in this episode. Really, really, really. Like, I mean, he was just black and white O'Brien. Like, I couldn't... He showed zero sympathy even after, you know, hearing from this Jem'Hadar person who was trying to get Bashir's help, you know, and I mean, didn't believe him, which is fair. Like, but he kept, you know, even after he saw evidence, and, you know, was just refusing to see this person as anything other than, you know, a Jem'Hadar soldier. And I give huge props to Julian, who, like, kind of put his foot down and was like, I'm the ranking officer here. I'm giving you an order. Like, this is what we're doing. And O'Brien just really, I was not a fan.
Yeah. I think most of the people agree with you here that, let me see. So we have, first of all, just to reiterate again, the reason that Julian outranks O'Brien is because he's an officer and O'Brien's enlisted. So he's always going to be outranked by him. But I think, and some people in the chat are mentioning this too, that but O'Brien is coming into it saying, like, you might outrank me, but I have the military background. And right now we need to survive. We need to get out of here. This is the enemy. And so, a few comments here. I just wanted to go back. Yeah, Bahana said, O'Brien thought he knew better due to his experience. DS9er said, to him it was about saving his friend and surviving. D Starfire agrees with you. Short-sighted, hard-headed. Does not feel like O'Brien we know. Mohammed says, prioritizing getting back to his family over anything else. Jedi said, helped me was understanding battles O'Brien had with the Borg. Did you mean the Cardassians or the Borg? I'm trying to remember O'Brien's fight with the Borg. But Astro, I guess Astro kind of has the same opinion or the same take on this, is that it adds a layer to our understanding of the Jem'Hadar, that they aren't just mindless killers.
Exactly, and that's what was frustrating about O'Brien, is he was literally just seeing them as a blanket thing. We had the same thing when he went to the prison camp. I think he was like he was just seeing the Cardassians as Cardassians, and. I mean, yes, absolutely fair enough that he has these experiences that would perhaps lead him to these quick snap conclusions, and need to get out. We need to save our own. But he's not seeing any gradation in the fact that these Jem'Hadar soldiers might not be the same as the other Jem'Hadar soldiers. There are differences there. And the same would come with the Borg. Like, there are certain Borg situations where they're trying to leave the collective.
Right.
And they're not connected to the collective, and they're trying to change. And, you know, to see them as the same, to see that Borg person as the same as, you know, a Borg that's doesn't have a mind of their own is just not conducive to, like, they're not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, Bad Panda Bear said they find it an interesting flaw to his character that he can be so blind when it comes to the enemy. Mm-hmm. It's the enemy. And it's like he's made minimal strides with Cardassians, but his default setting is the bad guys are the bad guys. And they need to be destroyed and we need to survive. And some of that is family. You know, they have, not necessarily in this episode, but they've always intimated that he wants his family to survive. He is a family man, and he has to do what he can to make sure that they're safe. But, you know, and D. Starfire said this too, that it's the founders who are the true evil, and I think that's why it's so hard for us as the viewers, is that we realize that they're not really the bad guys. And then, we cleared up too in the chat that with the Borg, that was on the Enterprise. So it's like O'Brien has the experience with the Cardassians, the Borg, now the Dominion and the Jem'Hadar, and he's just like, pfft. Yeah. Sorry, I'm catching up on the chat.
No, that's all right. I'm going to look at my notes.
Lots of good conversation here. So Todd said, I think we and Bashir could see the humanity in them, but O'Brien's military experience with species who are not open to compassion. He's wrong, but in his mind it was a fatal mistake for Bashir to make.
Right.
It's a side of O'Brien we necessarily haven't seen before. I think we have seen it a little bit with the Cardassians. Like, with that Cardassian kid, he was, like, super racist to that kid.
Right.
And then, and he does have those flaws. I think Wahana pointed out, too, that we had that. You're getting a toast for complexity. And, I think it's interesting. I like the debate on it, because I think it is nuanced, and I like that.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see Bashir and O'Brien's relationship, you know, strained now. They're a little kind of they're like, we're going to take a break. Because it really kind of came to a little bit of a head of like philosophical differences that really made an impact. Like, Bashir could not save the people he wanted to save because O'Brien was so black and white on we have to get out of here. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this affects them, because I think they really saw different sides of each other, you know.
Give me one second here.
That's right. And isn't this also the episode where we see a little bit of Worf and Odo, or is that the next one? This is mostly on the planet, right? I had notes about that, but I think it might have been next one.
I think that was, we get a little bit, like, Worf has a little bit of Cisco-ness in this episode, where we do start to see, so one of the things that I really, really enjoy, Worf learns to mind his own business. This is the one, this is the one with Odo. So this is essentially where Worf sees all this nonsense going on at Quark's, and he steps in and interferes, and then breaks this whole, like, long game that Odo had with Quark, where he was, like, trying to, like, suss out who was, like, screwing everything up with the smuggling ring, and he's like, God damn it, Worf, like...
Yeah. And Cisco's like, Deep Space Nine is different.
Yeah.
You gotta sort of, yeah.
Little gray areas here.
A little bit, yeah.
That is so funny. Yeah, and DS9 are, exactly. I mean, that's what they came to, that's what they realized, is that there were these species of Jem'Hadar who can live without the Ketracel white, but they had this placebo effect that they thought that because they were on this planet, that was the cause and effect aspect. Yeah, it's interesting. But all right, any more on this one?
Not from me.
Okay, so the next episode is Indiscretion. This episode expands on the backstories of Dukat, the Cardassian occupation of Bajor, and the resistance cell that Kira was involved with. This is where they find a crashed spaceship that had some survivors that Kira thinks her friend is among them, and Gul Dukat thinks his his full daughter, who's half Bajoran, half Cardassian, is on this, is one of the survivors. So Gul Dukat and Kira go to try to rescue them. And they discover the Breen, who are a really interesting alien race. A friend of mine I used to work with, he flies a Breen ship in Star Trek Online, which is real interesting.
Okay.
And we get to meet Tora Ziyal, Dukat's daughter, who's half Bajoran. So, Samantha, over to you.
I really don't want to say anything.
You can say it. It's okay. We don't judge here. I mean, we judge a little bit, but I can see your notes.
Because I don't mind Dukat. He seems like a cool guy. I don't know why.
It's so funny. But remember, and I'm reminding the chat of this, most of us have seen all of Deep Space Nine. Samantha hasn't. And that's the interesting aspect to this, is that you can go through this. And they even said this in the Deep Space Nine documentary, is when Deep Space Nine was airing, Dukat was one of the favorite Cardassians. And so this is part of Samantha's journey. And I support you. And if you continue to enjoy Dukat, that is okay, and we will support that. But you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm fully expecting he's going to become a horrible person at some point. but I don't know. There's just something about him that I find there's a vulnerability there. There's just got a lot of interesting layers. I will say his speech to Kira about the Bajor is better off now because the Cardassians were there. Like, that was all kinds of wrong. Like, that was really gross, really slimy. That was horrible. But there were that was one moment in an episode of better moments for Dukat. And I mean, Kira was interesting here too, because she saw some other sides of him that, she might obviously still hate him, but I think she saw at least more of those layers that we're getting.
Yeah.
No,
it's okay. It really is okay. I think too, it's interesting because I feel like the writers were, and again, if you've seen the documentary, you have a little bit of an insight to this, but like the fact that they kind of toy a little bit of like Kira and Dukat getting together,
Ooh.
And
I would not go that far.
So, but I think that they, that's testing the waters at this point, right? That it's like seeing if there's that chemistry, because there is an underlying thing with that. Like, obviously Dukat is kind of that type of dude. The intimating with, the relationships that he's had with Bajoran women in the past.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was and even at the end, I was thinking what Kira was probably thinking when she's like, you're going to take her back with you? Like, isn't that going to cause a lot of trouble? And I was thinking he's going to kill her when he gets back to Cardassia. Like, that still was definitely an option in my mind of what he's capable of. Like, yeah. So, I mean, he's just got a lot going on.
And that's okay. As someone who has vehemently defended many villains in my time, I can understand this. I have tattoos of villains that I should not defend, and yet I can't help myself. So I stand by this. But the question, and you kind of just answered it too, but like, what did you think he was, did you think he was going to kill his daughter?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
100%.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
it does, it is pretty, and Bahana said Dukat is one of the most complex villains I've ever seen. And it's fair. I think he is complex. And they do a good job about not making him purely just this evil dude.
Exactly.
So it's pretty interesting. But which ones? You mean my tattoos? Well, debate if you would count him as a villain. I don't, but after the 6th Harry Potter book came out, that I got Severus Snape's name tattooed on me, and then got another tattoo of him after the 7th book came out. But trans rights are human rights, and we're all have complex relationships with Harry Potter right now, because trans rights are human rights, and F that, anything else. Anyway,
yeah.
I also have Scar from The Lion King and Captain Hook, right. And those are a little bit harder to defend. I like that. Umbra said he's not pure evil, he's 96 octane evil. Fair enough. Yeah, I think this is it's a good episode, I think, to do like a touch back to Kira. Like, they haven't completely let go of her. It's like, oh, well, we know everything about her now. She's made growth with Cisco and the religion relationship and all of that. I think it's good that they kind of go back and we get to see her relationship with the Cardassians. And it's, and Tora Ziyal, we'll see her again. And I really like her character a lot. So
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's great. Thanks, Braston. That's part of the reason. All right. All right. Last episode. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a perfect Valentine's Day episode to end it on. This is Rejoined. This is the 6th episode. This is the one where Jadzia's former host's wife is coming onto the ship. I didn't want to say ex-wife because they never divorced, she was widowed. Well,
when they're trying to explain it to Quark, I was like, we should just try and regurgitate that. And Quark was so cute. He was like, I don't understand.
I know, it was so good. It was so great. Thank you, DS9 fan. You just summed it all up, so that's fair. Okay, so with this episode, so Lenara Khan is the widow of one of the previous hosts. The two struggle with their feelings for each other because there's a taboo in Trill society against hosts reuniting with loved ones of former hosts as they try to generate a wormhole. This episode was directed by Avery Brooks, who plays Cisco. And they said was his favorite. He said this was his favorite episode that he directed. That it has really good, complex insight into love and the choices and result from that, and that what happens when you lose someone and then having that person restored to you. I really like this episode. Yeah,
I did too. It was really, really well done. And again, kind of one of those self-contained stories. And, the acting was great. The story was super interesting. I love getting more and more insight into the Trill society and Trill culture. This was not such a positive look at Trill society. It was really interesting how they're approaching this, and symbiont life above all costs and above certain happiness. So that was a really interesting sort of, again, allegorical look at what you just said, love and what happens when it leaves, what happens when it comes back. and it did seem interesting that they were saying like this feels different than the other times I've met previous hosts that I've like either been with, or they're like this time feels different. I've never had this much trouble getting over it. Which it was interesting. It was just I liked it.
Yeah. I'm glad. I think it's a really, really good episode, and especially thinking about the context of when it aired and having obviously two women or female presenting actors kiss and have romantic tension with each other was pretty not seen that often in the 90s, that especially on sort of a mainstream show. And so the fact that they kind of took that story on, and I remember reading that original drafts of this script had that widow being a man, but then they found that opportunity to make this a parallel to say like, okay, Trill has these cultural, societal things that don't seem logical. Well, so do we. And the things that we have that don't seem logical is that gay people can't be in a relationship and can't be married. And that doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to that. And so the fact that they were able to parallel those so neatly in the time that it was, and I think even now, but particularly in that time, is just brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, they did that really, really well. And I thought their chemistry together was very well done, and like they had a lot of chemistry and they really brought it felt to me like there were like they were had all these memories of previous hosts, and they really felt like two people who had so many lifetimes to them, and the way they were speaking to each other was just I don't know, it just felt really real for like Trill real as well as human real.
Well, and I think the thing that they conveyed so well that does relate to us is this idea that you can go back to a relationship that had fallen apart in your past for whatever reason, and that chemistry may be there, but you as a person have fundamentally changed. And I like particularly when Lenara, when Jadzia says, look, this is good enough, I will throw away my Trill future to do this. And Lenara's like, you have other people in you that were not there before. Like that Curzon is a rule breaker, and that is not something that I could ever do. And we are now fundamentally different from what we were before. Even though that chemistry is still there, and even though it still feels like it can happen, we're still just too different. And I just think it's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great metaphor. I have to admit, I didn't fully pick up on that one when I watched it. But that's a really good, like, way to represent that.
Yeah, and Todd mentioned enjoying how this episode had these women in a relationship, yet all they did was focus on the taboo of the Trill society. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were both female presenting. It was it was just, and I mean, and they've done that before, right? With we talked about that in the episode where Quark was in love with and Jadzia's just like had no issue that Quark was kind of had a crush on this other male appearing Ferengi. Jadzia was like, you go, bro. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And heartbreaking. That last scene where she turns around and sees Jadzia, and Jadzia's really torn up is really tough to watch. Jadzia took a big risk with that.
Yeah. And I honestly wasn't sure what direction it was going to go. It seemed like it could have ended with Jadzia saying, "Okay, this is it. And if she had agreed, they would be together, and then just, yeah. But,
yeah. Any, before I talk about the little dorky side things that I love in this episode, any other profoundness you would like to share?
I think I'm out of profoundness.
Okay. All right. I love the magic trick nonsense in this. So if you don't remember this, because it's such a tiny thing, but having just rewatched it, the cold open for this is Jadzia doing a magic trick, but it's like the egg coming, like it's the, sleight of hand basic magic tricks, and Quark's mind is blown. Quark,
I love it.
He's like, oh, I figured it out. You swallowed the egg before you came in the bar, and then you regurgitated it. He's like, that's really gross, actually.
So cute. And then I love when she pulls the latinum out of his ear. And Bashir actually does it too, which is funny. And it made me think of that Calvin and Hobbes strip where his dad pulls a quarter out of his ear, and then he has Hobbes like shake him up and down. He's like, anything? Because that would be something Quark would do. Like, wait, there's latinum in my ear.
Exactly, because when Bashir pulls that on him later with Kira there, the next, all you see off screen is like Rom like sticking his head in to look in Quark's ear. It's so good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, it's like the Dr. Neelix shell game in Voyager. That's true. That was so good.
Exactly.
And then I also love we have to end with an awarfable moment when they're all sitting around at their very casual reception, and they're like, Quark, what do Klingons dream of? And he's like, nothing that you puny humans could understand. He's like, nothing that's worth hearing.
It is best not to tell you.
Jeez, man. Cocktail conversation.
Exactly. And it's just so straight with it, which is the best.
So good. And then Kira is just bemused. Yeah, the things that would chill your blood. And they're just like,
right.
All right.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
So good. I love it.
So good.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think that's it for these episodes. Let me pull up the ones we'll do next time. But we are back in the thick of it. Enjoying it so far.
Yay! Oh, for sure.
Worf is back.
Yay! My favorite.
Yes,
so
exactly. Exactly. And we are going to scroll down. Almost there. All right, so we'll be talking about the next 6 episodes. Yes, thank you. Oh yeah, D Starfire, and then someone quips, you can never tell when he's joking or not. This is true. Oh, sweet.
Right.
We have some gems next time. Okay, we are going to be discussing Starship Down, which is great in its own right. Little Green Men, The Sword of Kahless, Our Man Bashir, Homefront, and Paradise Lost, which is a 2-parter. So we will end with Paradise Lost at the end of that 2-parter, and we will, yes, Our Man Bashir. And
I like the title of the episode. We know I love Bashir.
Yeah, between Our Man Bashir and Little Green Men are just 2 of my favorites. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun with those. And so I think we're good for next Sunday, but definitely keep an eye on our Twitter pages. We'll update you if anything comes up. And thank you all for hanging out with us and geeking out about Deep Space Nine.
Yay!
All right, everyone, take care. Live long and prosper.
Happy Sunday.
All right. Bye.